I'll leave at dawn. Her voice was steady, even if her hands were not. Clara Whitmore stood in the middle of the small ranch house, her single suitcase resting by her boots, dust still clinging to the hem of her travel-worn dress. She had crossed half the country by train and wagon to reach this stretch of land outside Abilene, believing in ink on paper and promises written in a careful, slanted hand. Now she stood before the man who had written those letters, and the silence between them felt wider than the prairie. Thomas Hale did not look like the man from the letters. He looked harder, broader across the shoulders, sun-browned and quiet. His jaw flexed as if he were chewing on words he did not want to release. The oil lamp on the table cast a low amber glow across the room, catching the rough edges of the wooden walls and the iron stove in the corner. "You just got here," he said at last. "And I was not expected," she replied softly. The truth lay heavy between them. He had written for a wife after pressure from neighbors and the town pastor. A rancher alone for too long invited trouble. Gossip. Danger. But when her train had arrived and he saw her step down, slight of frame, with intelligent gray eyes and a stubborn tilt to her chin, he had hesitated. That hesitation had cut deeper than any spoken rejection. "I didn't say you weren't expected." "You didn't need to." Her chin lifted a fraction higher. "I saw it in your face." Outside, the wind dragged across the plains, rattling the loose shutter against the side of the house. Cattle lowed faintly in the distance. The world out there was vast and unforgiving, and she had no family within 1,000 miles. Thomas rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. "You traveled alone." "Yes. That's not safe. Neither is staying where I am not wanted." The words landed clean and sharp. He took a step toward the door without thinking, and for a moment she believed he meant to open it for her. But instead his hand settled against the wood as if testing its strength. "I'll leave at dawn," she repeated, more quietly now. His gaze met hers and something shifted. Not desire, not yet, but recognition. He had expected desperation or tears. What stood before him was pride. "You don't know what's out there," he said. "I know enough." Her voice faltered only slightly. "I have been unwanted before." That confession slipped out like breath in winter air, visible and fragile. He felt it then, the weight she carried that had nothing to do with her suitcase. "You were married?" he asked carefully. She nodded once. "Widowed, 3 years ago. And no one else? No one who wished to keep me?" The oil lamp flickered as if stirred by an unseen hand. He studied her face again, seeing past the dust and fatigue. The lines at the corner of her eyes were not from age, but from endurance. She had survived something. "You think I won't keep you? I think you're unsure." He did not deny it. A knock shattered the fragile quiet. 3 hard raps against the door. Thomas stiffened. Clara's fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase. Thomas moved to the window and shifted the curtain aside just enough to see. 2 riders sat mounted near the gate, shadows against the fading light. He recognized them instantly. Caleb Mercer and his younger brother, men who had been circling his property for months with thin smiles and thick intentions. They wanted his land, the water rights beneath it. "What do they want?" Clara whispered. "Trouble," Thomas replied. The knock came again, harder this time. Thomas opened the door just enough to step outside, closing it behind him. Clara could hear the murmur of voices, low and edged. She moved closer despite herself, catching fragments. "Heard you got yourself a bride. Traveling alone's risky business? Be a shame if something happened." Her stomach tightened. Thomas's voice came back cold and level. "My affairs are my own." Caleb Mercer laughed softly. "Everything out here is everyone's affair." Bootsteps approached the porch. Clara stepped back instinctively, but before she could retreat further, the door swung open. Thomas filled the doorway, blocking the entrance with his frame. His expression had changed. The hesitation she had seen earlier was gone. "They were just leaving," he said without looking at her. Behind him, Caleb's eyes flicked over her shoulder, measuring, assessing. "Pretty thing," he drawled. "Mail order?" Thomas's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Leave." A tense pause. Then boots scraped against wood, and the sound of horses turning away drifted into the night. Thomas shut the door firmly and slid the iron bar into place. Silence settled again, but it felt different now, thicker. "You see," he said quietly, "Dawn won't make you safer." She swallowed. "I won't hide behind your door." He turned then, fully facing her. "It's not hiding, it's surviving." Her pride flared. "I didn't come here to survive. I came to belong." The words struck him harder than he expected. Belong. That was the one thing he had not allowed himself to consider. Not after his first wife died in childbirth. Not after burying both her and the infant beneath a lone cottonwood tree at the edge of the property. Grief had carved him hollow, and he had sealed the emptiness with routine and distance. "You don't know what belonging costs," he said. Her eyes softened unexpectedly. "I do." A long pause stretched between them. Outside, the wind rose sharper, carrying with it the faint rumble of thunder rolling across distant hills. A storm was building. Thomas glanced at the suitcase still in her hand. "You can take the spare room tonight." "And at dawn?" He hesitated. Thunder cracked closer this time, rattling the windows. Clara flinched despite herself. The storm was coming fast. The plains did not forgive those caught in the open. "I'll leave at dawn," she said again, but her voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. Thomas stepped toward the door once more. He lifted the iron bar and tested its weight in his palm. Then he set it firmly back into place, securing it. "You won't leave alone," he said quietly. Her breath caught. He did not look at her when he spoke again. "Not while those men are circling, not while the storm's rolling in, not while you're under my roof. And after?" He finally met her gaze. "We'll decide that after." The first heavy drops of rain struck the roof like thrown pebbles. Then came the downpour, sheets of water slamming against wood and earth, turning dust into mud within minutes. Lightning split the sky white, and thunder answered with a roar that seemed to shake the very bones of the house. Clara set her suitcase down slowly. The storm raged through the night. Wind clawed at the walls, and at one point the barn doors banged violently against their hinges. Thomas moved without hesitation, grabbing his coat. "I have to secure the horses." "I'm coming." "No." "Yes." The argument was brief but fierce. He saw the determination in her eyes again, and realized she would follow whether he allowed it or not. "Stay close," he ordered. They stepped into the storm together. Rain soaked them instantly, plastering fabric to skin. Mud sucked at their boots as they ran toward the barn. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the frantic shapes of horses rearing against their stalls. Thomas moved with practiced efficiency, but Clara did not stand idle. She grabbed a loose rope securing a swinging gate, her hair whipping wildly around her face. A crack of wood split the air. A fence post snapped near the corral, and one horse bolted free. Without thinking, Clara ran. "Clara!" Thomas shouted, but the wind swallowed her name. She caught the trailing reins just before the horse could clear the yard. The animal reared in panic. She held on with both hands, mud splattering her dress. Thunder boomed so loud it felt inside her chest. Then suddenly Thomas was there beside her, his hand closing over hers on the reins. Together they steadied the animal, breathing hard. For a suspended moment, amid rain and lightning, their eyes met. No hesitation, no doubt, just shared survival. They led the horse back inside and barred the barn doors tight. When they finally returned to the house, both were drenched, shivering, and breathless. Inside, lamplight flickered warmly against storm-dark windows. Clara wrung out her skirt, trying not to laugh from sheer exhaustion. "You could have been killed," Thomas said, but there was no anger in it, only awe. "So could you," she replied. Another crash of thunder rolled overhead. He stepped closer, almost unconsciously, as if ensuring she was truly there and unharmed. She became suddenly aware of how near he stood, how solid and warm despite the cold rain. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "So did I." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small ranch house, something steadier began to form. An understanding born not from letters, but from standing shoulder to shoulder in the dark. Before either of them could speak again, a gunshot echoed faintly from somewhere beyond the fields. They both froze. Thomas's jaw hardened. He moved to the window cautiously. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Caleb Mercer was not finished. Thomas turned back toward Clara, decision blazing clear in his eyes. "You're not leaving at dawn," he said firmly. The words settled between them, heavier than the thunder, still rolling across the plains. Another gunshot split the night, closer now. No mistaking it. The sound did not belong to the storm. It belonged to intent. Clara's pulse thudded in her ears. They're trying to scare us. Thomas reached above the hearth and lifted down his rifle with calm precision. No, he said quietly. They're testing how far they can go. A third shot rang out, this time followed by the sharp, panicked cry of cattle. Thomas swore under his breath. That was no warning. That was damage. He moved toward the door, but Clara stepped in front of him. You can't walk into the dark alone. His eyes flashed. I won't hide while they cripple my herd. And I won't wait here wondering if you'll come back. The storm had begun to ease, rain softening to a steady drizzle, but lightning still flickered far off on the horizon. The yard lay in shifting shadows. Thomas hesitated only a second before nodding once. Stay behind me. If I say run, you run. They stepped outside together. The air smelled of wet earth and gunpowder. Mud clung thick to their boots as they crossed toward the pasture fence. Another distant shot, but this one angled away, riding off into the open land. They're leaving, Clara breathed. For now, Thomas replied. They reached the corral gate. One of the steers lay wounded near the fence, a dark shape against darker mud. Clara swallowed hard at the sight. Thomas knelt beside the animal, examining the wound with a steady hand. It'll live, he muttered, if infection doesn't take it. Anger simmered beneath his calm exterior, not wild rage, but something colder and more dangerous. Caleb Mercer had crossed a line tonight. Clara stood watch, scanning the dark fields. The prairie felt endless and exposed, and yet she did not feel small. She felt anchored, beside him. We should ride to town, she said softly. Report it. Thomas rose slowly. By the time the sheriff bothers to saddle up, the Mercers will be home drinking coffee. You don't trust the law. I trust what I can see. She stepped closer. Then what do you see? He looked at her, really looked at her, in the dim light. I see a woman who thought she was leaving at dawn. Despite everything, a faint breath of laughter escaped her. I did. And now? She glanced across the wounded pasture, the broken fence, the dark horizon where danger lingered. Now I see that leaving won't stop them. No. Silence stretched again, but it was no longer uncertain. It was shared. They worked through the remainder of the night, binding the steer's wound and reinforcing the fence with spare posts. The physical labor steadied them, built something unspoken between them. By the time pale gray light touched the eastern sky, exhaustion weighed heavy on Clara's limbs. Her dress was stiff with mud, her hair tangled beyond repair. Thomas looked little better, shirt torn at the sleeve, boots caked thick. Dawn had come. She stood at the edge of the porch, watching the first sunlight creep over the plains. Her suitcase still sat by the door where she had left it hours ago. Thomas followed her gaze. He did not touch it. He did not move it. He simply stood beside her. Well, he said quietly, it's dawn. She drew in a slow breath. The air felt different now, not softer, but clearer. She had arrived as a stranger with a promise folded in her pocket. She had been ready to leave as a rejected arrangement. Now she stood in the aftermath of gunfire and storm, still here. I suppose it is, she replied. He waited. She turned toward the suitcase, studied it for a long moment, then nudged it gently aside with the toe of her boot. I won't leave at dawn, she said. Something unreadable flickered across his face, relief tangled with responsibility. You're certain? No, she met his eyes steadily, but I'm not afraid. A horse approached down the road, barely visible through the morning haze. Both of them stiffened. Thomas stepped slightly forward, positioning himself instinctively between Clara and the rider. The figure slowed as it neared the gate. It was not Caleb Mercer. It was Pastor Wilkes from town, hat tipped low against the damp air. He dismounted stiffly and approached the fence. I heard shots, the pastor called. Half the town did. His eyes swept the damaged pasture. Seems the Mercers made their point. Thomas said nothing. The pastor's gaze shifted to Clara, measuring, kind but knowing. You must be Mrs. Hale. Clara hesitated only a heartbeat before answering. Not yet. The pastor smiled faintly. Town's already talking. Let them, Thomas muttered. Pastor Wilkes leaned lightly on the fence. Caleb's father is pushing hard. He wants this land. He believes you won't fight if you're alone. Thomas's jaw tightened. I'm not alone. The pastor nodded slowly, eyes flicking between them as if witnessing something fragile forming. That changes matters. Clara stepped forward. Will the town stand by and watch? The pastor considered. The town follows strength and proof. Thomas glanced toward the wounded steer. You'll have proof. Pastor Wilkes gave a slow nod. Then perhaps it's time the Mercers learn that storms don't always wash people away. He mounted his horse again and rode back toward town. Clara watched him disappear into the lightening horizon. Do you regret writing those letters? She asked quietly. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. No. Even now? Especially now. The simplicity of his answer struck deeper than any grand declaration. He stepped closer, careful, as if approaching something easily startled. I didn't bar that door to trap you. I know. I barred it because out here, you don't face danger alone. She searched his face and found no hesitation there this time. No rejection, no doubt, only resolve. And what happens when the next storm comes? She asked softly. His gaze drifted toward the horizon, where sunlight now burned through the last retreating clouds. Then we face it, together. A faint sound carried on the breeze, distant riders gathering in town, words spreading, alliances shifting. The Mercers had fired their warning shot, but something else had been set in motion. Clara felt it in her bones. She had not come west merely to marry. She had come to begin again, and beginnings were rarely gentle. Thomas reached past her and lifted the suitcase from the floor. He carried it not toward the door, but down the short hallway toward the spare room. You'll need a proper place for your things, he said. Her breath caught at the quiet certainty in his tone. Behind them, the sun climbed higher over the wide Texas plains outside Abilene, casting gold across the battered but standing ranch. The storm had passed, the gunfire had not driven her away, and the door that had once felt like an exit now stood as shelter.